You are live.
We are resuming testimony on 488, and I think Kelly Stoddard 4 from AARP may be with us.
Hi there.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. Are you ready for me?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right, excellent. Thank you so much. Hold on. I'm just going to pull up my testimony. And for the record, Kelly Stoddard Poor with AARP Vermont. I serve as the Associate State Director on behalf of AARP, and I lead our livable community work. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on complete streets and the Vermont state standards in H488 sections 28 and 29, I believe. AARP has been a longtime supporter of complete streets. We championed complete streets back in 2011 and worked closely with VTrans on that legislation. And we have seen, tremendous political support increase over the years for complete streets. We've seen a large increase in walking and biking over the years, which hit record highs during the pandemic. Older adults increased their biking by 35% in 2020, and that enthusiasm has continued as we see skyrocketing sales of e-bikes being purchased by older adults. But we also see safety concerns. So one of the things that we constantly hear when I go out and do walk audits across Vermont is the speed. The level of speed is concerning. Cars are going too fast, our roads are too wide, but so there's things that we can do to improve that. And just to share a couple of quick stats, and I did share some slides earlier that you can see more detail around the stats, but in Vermont, from 2013 to 2017, we had 27 pedestrian deaths. And in 2018 to 2022, we had 31 pedestrian deaths. So we've seen an increase in pedestrian deaths on Vermont roads. And that is really concerning. What we hear from our members and from older adults, when we survey them back in 2022, we did a survey. We saw a huge increase in the concern of how am I going to get around as I get older? How am I going to keep my independence if I'm not able to drive? What are the other options of getting around in my community? And that includes walking, biking, and using public transit. And so we need to make sure we're making the right types of investments on our roadways. Back in 2022, I hired Smart Growth America to do an analysis of Vermont's complete street statute to look at both short-term and long-term policy recommendations. Of those 4 short-term complete streets policy recommendations, I worked with VTrans on the following legislative year in 2023. And that included updating VTrans's internal complete streets policy, which they worked on and did. Number 2 was making complete streets data publicly available. So previously, if you wanted to find complete streets data, you had to make a request of VTrans to get that data. And now you can go onto VTrans's website and access that data. The third one is providing training and resources to localities. This is really important. There's a real lack of capacity and training for complete streets that I think has really hindered a lot of smaller Vermont communities to implement complete streets. So we're very supportive of VTrans continuing to do that work and making sure that they have the resources to do so. And then the fourth one is revising the Vermont state standards, which are from 1997. And, complete streets really relies on implementation of complete streets really relies on towns using the best and latest state of the practice design standards and guidelines. AARP, I've been involved in the process around updating the Vermont state standards back in 2015 when VTrans brought in Smart Growth America to facilitate workshops to create a framework for updating the standards. It kind of got stalled for a few years afterwards as VTrans looked to bring in funding so that they could overhaul the Vermont state standards. And I've been involved in that process since they've been able to secure the money for updating the standards. Some of the pieces in H488, with the focus on context sensitivity is really important. And defining an acceptable level of safety is an important piece for us when we're looking at updating the Vermont state standards, and looking and using a level of traffic stress to be able to determine how safe it is for people walking and biking on our roadways. Another piece that's important to ARP is that will be incorporated into the standards is around winter maintenance. So we really want to have good guidance around winter maintenance, because what I hear from a lot of Vermont communities is that when we're looking at the width of the travel lanes, they're being, they're accommodating a 14-foot plow in either direction. And so that leads me to the next piece where I think there's a lot of opportunity, not in Vermont state standards, but looking at ways to incentivize towns to be able to take over state highways that run through their village centers. And so, because that is where there's a lot of concern, because there's not the funding to be able to take over those state highways and make them a Class 1 highway so that complete streets can better be implemented. We just finished up another study with Smart Growth America and worked with VTrans on this around the reclassification of state highways, which I would be happy to share with you. I don't think there's any action right now, but I hope that next legislative session we could work together to find ways that we can really support small communities to be able to take over state highways that run through their village centers. I think that's a real barrier for implementing complete streets and just more multimodal design in those village centers.
Senator White has a question.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It's lovely to see you. And I appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us. The last thing you just said is really valuable to hear. And I do hope that we can work on some either a legislative resolution, or if it's an internal policy, that would be very helpful around the classification of roads. I'm wondering if when you look at 488, we added a section. I actually don't know if I think we're taking it out most likely because it is prescriptive around the complete streets piece. I think we're removing that, but I think we heard enough testimony to the effect that the principles that you're talking about are being included in the next planning process. So my comment would be, I wonder if you participated in that. I think you have a multi-step process that's occurring.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any feedback on that? And an ask, which is, as we go through that process, if there's ways that the legislature can be supportive in promoting, I think, the very good goals that you have around safety and access for older Vermonters, please let us know. So yeah, I wonder if you could reflect on that process that's happening now with the agency a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in the process since 2015 when VTrans first started looking at updating the standards, which are much needed. It was, it stalled for a few years afterwards, and so it's been really refreshing to see the effort and the resources being put in to updating the standards, and also engaging stakeholders like AARP and others in the process. I worked with our colleagues over at Local Motion and VNRC to submit a memo to VTrans as part of the Vermont State Standard updates, outlining some of the key pieces that we would like to see incorporated, like looking at the level of stress as part of the guidance when we're thinking about context sensitivity. Context sensitivity is really important, right? It's not a one size fits all for Vermont communities. And then the other piece is that the winter maintenance piece, to really be able to have some specific guidance around winter maintenance, because that tends to be a real sticking point when we're looking at the design of roads.
What is that issue? Sorry,
Go ahead.
what is that issue about the winter? Like who does it, or just that it be done, or how, or actually like what, to what level is it? The snow cleared, or all three?
So as I was sharing earlier, it's just that for a lot of small Vermont communities, state highways run through their village center, right? So Marshfield's a great example of that. You've got Route 2 going through. And so the town is going to not take over that state highway because of the maintenance costs and the snow plows. So the road has been designed for snow plows going in either direction of 4 feet wide. And the width of travel lanes, the wider our travel roads are, the faster people are going to travel. Just it's by nature that we do that, right? I think we're all kind of guilty of that. And so when we want to look at designing a village center or a roadway that is accommodating for people who are walking and biking, we want to think about getting the road as narrow as possible to not impede traffic. And then being able to incorporate whether it's, just a very wide shoulder for walking, or it's a sidewalk in one direction, or a bike lane. That makes it really hard when those state highways are running through village centers. And so having some specific guidance around winter maintenance and how the curb is designed so that you can accommodate plows, et cetera, is important from our perspective at ARP, because we want to see people be able to walk and bike and catch the bus safely on roads. And when I'm out doing walk audits, and I will say like my expertise is around pedestrian safety for the most part, the speed of cars is really, really concerning, and it will keep people from not walking.
Yeah. So would that maintenance issue also apply to like a raised walkway or a becoming speed bumps?
Yeah, you could have speed bumps, or you could have curbed bulb outs as well, so that it's more accommodating for the snowplow. There's different ways that you can incorporate some winter maintenance guidance to make it easier to be able to accommodate those plows. Or the other piece that I'm going to put a plug in for, future consideration is to think about ways that we can incentivize communities, smaller towns, to be able to take over those state highways that run through their village centers, so that they would have more control over the design of the roadway.
And then they would have a smaller plow.
Yes.
Well, I'll give you an example. Along the village of Jeffersonville, the state 108 goes through the center of the village. We've had a terrible time because up until very recently, there was no parking for anybody that was a renter within the village. So in the winter, the V-Trans would make sure people came through and ticketed everybody that parked on the main street in the village. More recently, within the last 4 years, it finally came up with a parking lot, so people had a place to go. But people never had a place to go, and it's a village that state plows through the center of the village, and we've had struggles figuring out what do you do with a renter that has no place to put their car. And that's an example of.
And the issue in Marshfield is the state plow that they plow all the snow onto the sidewalk, which we then have to plow. And then if there's no coordination between when the plow different, the town contractor or when the state truck is going to come through. So we'll pay somebody to clean the sidewalks, but then the state will come through and just dump a bunch more snow on there. And he's like, hey, you're only paying me to do it once. So I'm not coming back.
Right. So to wrap up, Kelly, what I would say I'm hearing is you thus far are reasonably satisfied with the process that's happening with the agency now. But you'll be back here next year and give us a report on whether or not it continues to progress in a way that you think is appropriate.
And can I just add, I also think we heard a conversation about legislative action, maybe in combination with the agency, perhaps around the classification of local roads.
Yeah,
And
so, but
or
you'll
maybe not.
you'll be back with a report, but thus far, the work with the agency has been progressing, and you feel heard.
Yes, absolutely feel heard. Yes. And, I'm really excited, to be honest, about the update with the Vermont state standards. I think that it will provide a lot of opportunity for better guidance for Vermont communities. It's a long time in the making. They're what? Yeah, 27 years old. So it really does provide a great opportunity. And I think, and I know that this is a very tough fiscal climate right now, but any resources that can be dedicated to that technical assistance, training for complete streets, those are really important pieces for communities. And it can just help bolster town's capacity to really implement complete streets. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to note that one of the studies, I can't remember which section it is now, where we are looking at the connector roads and all of those.
Yep,
We're also bringing in this discussion of class 1 town highways into that framework, evaluating sort of how to potentially structure municipal funding in different ways. So I was pleased to have Kelly touch upon that. We appreciated doing that work with them on the class town highway options and issues. And so that'll be woven into that effort.
perfect. Thank you. You want to? Sure. Then we just we're narrowing this down to a few issues left.
So we have 3 remaining sections that we haven't touched on this morning that are new. They start on page 35 in draft 3.2. The first one, it's worth noting. So this was some rough language that I put together last night on the volunteer drivers issue with license application checkoff. And this would have required the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles in consultation with the public transit agencies that utilize volunteers to examine the potential of incorporating into the driver's license application a checkoff for other means to allow an individual to consent to having their contact information shared with an agency and then to report back. Simultaneously, Patrick Murphy from the agency was also working on language. The language he came up with is a little bit broader, and it provides that in consultation with VPTA, the commissioner would identify and pursue opportunities to communicate with the Vermont driving public regarding volunteer and community driver participation in the transportation services for older adults, Medicaid non-emergency, and other programs, including invitations to submit interest through the driver's licensing process, notices on the DMV website and web-based platforms, messaging on AOT social media, or some combination of those options. And then they would identify and pursue opportunities to increase that publicity together.
What about on the highway side?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Oh,
On the, the scrolling signs to tell you to,
I thought you were gonna talk about an exception to the billboard law.
no, this is just on the. Signs to tell you to buckle
That's
up.
what I thought he was headed towards. But the
Um,
only thing I didn't hear in there is car registrations.
I think that is encompassed within, I think that could be encompassed easily within,
Because the two
Patrick's.
places where we reach out to the most people are driver's licenses and registrations each year. And somehow if there was a notice on the registration, you could call this number or go to this site if you were ever interested. Even if it wasn't a checkoff,
Mhm.
we register 800,000 vehicles.
Something along those lines, Sam.
Yeah. So, I think the big question for the committee is, should we go with the broader language suggested by the agency? And I'll just put it into our format and have it in the next draft.
Broader language, I think, makes more sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great.
So we're
Patrick,
down to that broader language to consider.
right. Section 30 requires the Secretary of Transportation in consultation with Commissioner of Vermont Health Access to convene a working group to improve the coordination of healthcare and transportation services in relation to individuals enrolled in the various demand response transportation programs. It would be composed of stakeholders identified by the Secretary in consultation with the Commissioner of Vermont Health Access, including the Association of Hospitals and Health Systems, independent dialysis and methadone facilities, and the Public Transportation Association. They would examine various options for improving the coordination of healthcare and transportation services, including opportunities to coordinate scheduling and treatments to maximize scheduling of appointments and treatments to maximize shared rides, and opportunities to improve communications between the agencies and providers to facilitate coordination of the healthcare and transportation services for those individuals. So potentially, if there are options for an appointment, maybe there's a way they can coordinate a little bit better to say there are rides available at these times. And it's pretty open, so it's not requiring them to find a solution, and it's a report back on January 15th, 2026, to the committees here with their findings and any recommendations for legislative action, which may be none. They may be able to just figure out coordination internally.
Are we okay with that?
Yeah.
I think we're okay with that. And then you will have language that that you are working with DEVA that we'll consider tomorrow.
That's correct. And then that leaves the last piece is section 37, which is a portion of the S4 language. So there are two sections in S4. Section 1 authorizes municipal maintenance of legal trails. Section 2 authorizes municipal regulation of the uses of legal trails. This would be just section 1. It has a modification in here where the original language, which you can find on page 46, line 7, provided that that the select board or that the towns could maintain trails but shall not be required to maintain trails. And then it went on to say, and shall not be liable in relation to the trails, including with respect to culverts. And I'm paraphrasing because I forget the exact verbiage. The liability language is out in this draft. So before I go on with this language, as you know, Tucker and I have been doing continued research on this. I've begun reviewing the filings in the court case related to the trails in Tunbridge that you heard about. There there is an additional legal issue that's come to our attention.
And we'll watch
So-
tomorrow morning when
Right.
the full committee is here. To go through that, and we'll make a decision at that point whether or not we include any.
Right. So, yeah, and we're gonna continue working on that. And I'll give you an update on that tomorrow when you've got the
And
committee here.
I have checked with the Senate Secretary. That's partly why the adjustment is made in this first part of the language. This is still not uncontroversial. And you're gonna hear that from either Damien or Tucker and Damien tomorrow. And we're gonna have to make a decision, and some of it will be a tactical decision. We do plan on taking up next Thursday and Friday S4 in committee and working through the issues. So we will do a bill separately to this, but we will make a decision about whether we include this first part in after we hear from Ledge Council.
Is there still an earlier section of trails? I guess that's the only way on trails. There's no.
Yeah, so the legal trails section is one section, although it affects, I think, 4 sections of statute.
It's
So
all at the end.
it's all at the end. So it's without that, you get the bill down to 43 pages. With that, we're up at 47.
And the main change is
So
the underlined. Some of that underlined part is updating language, but it's selecting as a legislative body, but.
yeah, so the key changes are throughout adding this language relating to the authority to maintain the trails.
Exclusively, it's the law.
Right, and we'll talk about the reason why there is potential legal risk and controversy over that language tomorrow. And you can decide whether to keep going, but once we've got, I guess, the rest of the committee with us, so that everyone can hear that, and then make the decision.
Good.
So,
I'm okay with it.
all right,
So if we take we're about, how many pages was the House bill?
it was 22. You are effectively doubling it or more. So this is quite the role reversal. Usually the Senate would trim it down from the House. This is.
Brendan changes bodies and.
You guys have made me work on this one. Right?
Oh, can I have a question about the draft writing, which run the risk of giving extra work since the legislative that they don't want to do, but the past years since I've been on the committee, this started with Tim Ash, the suggestion we've done it, and Anthea seemed to have a kind of easy way of doing it. I don't know how easy. Anthea made a lot of things look easy, but I think the department helped.
Not recently.
So the department helped at the beginning, Anthea creating a section about all the kind of environmental parts of the T-bill. So just want to alert the chair that we started doing that because we say we're adopting the white book, but nobody looks through the white book. So we started saying, here are how many park and ride spaces we opened. Here's how many, what other great things.
And put it in the bill?
We actually put it in the bill, and we would, on the floor, we'd say, if you care about these things, here's a section. What else did we have in there? Maybe bike lanes and
Yeah.
electric cars that the same
Sidewalks.
kids.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was all the climate stuff.
yeah, I think it was climate or environmental stuff about. Reducing.
I'm not opposed to.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about.
Okay, but you can also let us know how onerous it is.
It's a lengthy section. It'll take a while to put it together. I can try to do that.
But I think the agency kind of went through the white book and said, here are all the things.
No, not recently.
Not recently.
It became 2 burdens.
But we did include it,
Yes, you did.
You did.
but Anthea did it.
Your joint fiscal post did it.
And I
I don't have that, I'm just saying.
So I
I mean, it clear.
I-
That's fine.
it's not anything that was ever in a T-bill, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so I'm not aware. I'm not opposed to doing something about it. And, you know, 24 hours before, I
Yeah,
hope
right.
this is out of here at this time. I would say that if if someone in Ledge Council that might do our drafting, it slows down, I wouldn't be opposed to the middle of next week voting an amendment out of here as part of the bill that would give
Okay.
him till next Wednesday to get this moving.
That, I mean, from a workflow standpoint, I don't think it'll be hard to do this, but it will be time consuming.
Right.
Because I mean, what Anthea did, it was about 5 or 6 pages of text summarizing the various policies in here that supported the goals of the Comprehensive Energy Plan, the Climate Action Plan, and the Paris Agreement goals. And then she would go by park and ride program and break out the amount of money, the projects, and what those projects meant. And then she would go, you know, bike and pedestrian, the amount of money, and then the number of projects, and then identifying, and this is a 10-line list of every municipality that had a project.
To help kind of,
Right.
and then let Senator see projects in the district, but I don't think it's needed. I mean, before the committee was getting more questions about the bike and ped stuff.
Well,
So-
I'm not opposed to including something like that. I just think between now and tomorrow,
Yeah, you're right.
it would be, but
It would be a big lift to get by tomorrow, but if you give me till next week and you want to do it as a floor amendment, to just add to the bill as a section 1A, I'm happy to draft that, and I can definitely pull it together.
it would get us
Anthea had
down
a
close
very-
to 50 pages, and they sent a 22-page little skimpy thing over.
More is better, right?
Of course, it's
Oh.
all about that.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I would note that if the latter process were undertaken, the agency would be happy to answer and assist in any questions that Ledge Council may have. A 24-hour turnaround on this feeling.
I'm feeling like I'm feeling your pain.
yeah.
But we at the point tomorrow, however long it takes us to get through the trails piece. And we have a couple of, and we have the diva language to go through. Which I think is all doable tomorrow. And then there'll be some small language changes about the cars and that sort of stuff. At that point, if we finish early and we get that, I think next week, it would be nice to do maybe an abbreviated portion of what Senator Burchett just brought up.
It'll likely be shorter this year because some of the funding that
We have
we utilized in prior years has dried up. So we're gonna lose most of the subdivision on vehicle incentive programs, for example. That funding's gone. So there are definitely things in here where just because of the current state of things, it'll shorten down, but yeah, and she created a sort of standardized section where I can fill in the blanks. It just takes time to go through the white book and pull everything out and make sure that I'm getting it right. I mean, I could just cut and paste last year's too, but
Well,
people might notice.
In that case, we'll take it.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to do something on that lines if it's
yeah,
possible.
I think, and I
To do next
think,
week.
I think if we could do that in an amendment next week, that would be.
Great. I appreciate your flexibility. So that'll make it doable for me.
You gotta have something to do. Yeah. Well, you know,
You know, that's family.
I was gonna say, I don't have kids who are gonna be doing Easter egg hunts,
you know.
we'll be dealing with sugar crashes on Sunday afternoon.
Oh, you'll be locking the door to your little office, won't you, Sam?
Oh, you think I have a separate office at home?
Well, we all saw during COVID, the whole family going.
Yeah. Yeah, as I would rotate based on who was napping.
I think at that point, Megan, we can say bye-bye.
Bye, Zoom.